Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Here are your hosts, Jmann and Danny, the Midwest motherfuckers. Well, welcome to episode 3. Tonight we decided that we were going to be interesting. And we're going to touch upon a topic that has been completely engulfing the media for the last year and a half. And that is death by cop in America. Because so many people are fed up with the state of police culture in this country right now. And the problem is not getting better. It's getting way, way worse. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon because it's not like the cops are going to give up their guns.
I think we should note that you were a cop for a short period of time, so you got a little bit of insight on this, don't you?
Yeah, I got zero insight from actually being a cop because I only had to pull out my gun once, and it was in a garage with a door sitting ajar. So there was some sort of alarm, and we walked in, and I drew down, and we looked under a vehicle, and then I holstered it, and then we left.
So you didn't have the urge to just fire one off?
Well, nobody was in there, so I would have just been like shooting bullets into a concrete garage floor, ricocheting up into the bottom of a parked vehicle.
But you didn't have the urge.
Plus, you know how much fucking paperwork is involved with firing your duty weapon?
It doesn't seem like they keep paperwork on it anymore.
Yeah, they totally do, and it's a mountain of paperwork. You don't see it. It's not like they go, well, here's the story of someone else who got shot by the cops, and here's a picture of all the fucking forms that the officer had to fill out for shooting off his gun.
How much of that, though, do you think they've just kind of quickly run through with bullshit?
It's basically for records of what transpired, anything on the legal side, I imagine, so that they can drop, okay, so you said that you fired it this many times, we actually checked, we've accounted for all the casings. I think it's more or less for statistics and ballistics there.
Right on.
And you got to do it whether you shoot a person or if you shoot a deer on the side of the road. So I don't know if a bunch of cops like keep secret sidearms like strapped to their ankle that they don't tell their supervisors about for shooting deer. I wouldn't be surprised
if they just had, their personal little snub nose in their boot.
Well, it seems to me that most DEA agents and FBI agents all carry multiple firearms, obviously, because they have their service weapon, which is visible, and then they have their secondary, and some of them probably have a third.
That might be different with them, though, because they're all undercover compared to actual on-duty police officers.
Well, yes and no. I mean, whether or not they're actually undercover, or whether or not they're just investigating something, interviewing a witness, or they're going into a crime scene to talk to people that may have witnessed things there. Basically, it's like training day when he walks into that house and those 3 cholos are playing dominoes at the table. Yeah. And he pulls his gun. They're like, oh, let me see that. So he pops out the mag and he checks the chamber, catches the gun, and he hands it to him. Well, because that stupid son of a bitch only had one gun, that's why next thing you know, he's bent over the side of a bathtub with a curtain pulled and a goddamn shotgun right in his face.
Yeah. You want to start with statistics now or later?
Let's run down the statistics because I wanted to touch upon the fact that we've got the whole hands up, don't shoot movement, which they think is their battle cry for don't kill us. But honestly, I think it sounds fucking stupid. I get the point of why they say what they mean, but it still sounds stupid.
So up to this day, they've had 776 killed by police. 161 were unarmed. That averages to about 3 per day. And the info you can find is from The Guardian. They have a project called The Counted. And they did this because, interestingly enough, the government doesn't keep track of this statistic. More white people were killed by police than any other race, with 385 total. 66 were unarmed. 745 were men. Police killed people in every state except for one. You want to try to take a guess at what state that was?
Wyoming.
No. Want to take another guess?
Idaho.
No, it was Rhode Island. Think about
Get the fuck out of town. Nobody in Rhode Island, nobody near Quahog got shot.
No.
Son of a bitch. Well, obviously Joe needs to find himself some time on the range to work on his marksmanship.
You want to guess what state had the most? What city had the most, I should say?
Houston?
No, close.
Los Angeles.
Houston's second. Los Angeles was first. They had 14. Houston had 11. Third place was Phoenix with 9, and then there's a tie for 4th with New York and Oklahoma with 7.
I want you to go back to the statistic of who gets shot the most by cops. Just say it again. Who gets shot the most?
White folks.
White folks. What do we see the most of in the media, though? People of color, predominantly blacks. To the best of my recollection, you only hear about 2 types of cop shootings. Blacks and whites. You don't hear a lot of statistics about Asians shot by the cops or Latinos shot by the cops. Apparently they're not pissed off enough as a social group to rise up and cause the media to report the statistics, but maybe it's because there's more white people. I don't know why the black community assumes that they get shot more, but that's just what we're focusing on, is that demographic of who gets shot. It didn't probably break it down by whether the cop was black, white, straight, gay, male, female.
No, these are just the straight raw numbers.
Okay, so we got no statistics on how many homosexual black cops that are southpaws actually killed anybody.
The SJ Warriors are going to be really pissed at us.
Jesus Christ. Dropping the ball.
Yes, yes. So shooting was also the most common cause of police-related deaths, with 680 of them.
And the number 2 cause of death by police was by tasering, which, let's touch upon that for a second. I went to cop school. I got my bachelor's in law enforcement. I went through skills and all that shit. Yeah. I've been tased. We have video of it. I mean, I have a DVD of it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I have the DVD of it. And maybe I overreacted, but the second it hit me, I was like, ah! And it's just 2 people holding your arms, and they lower you down to the mat. And it doesn't seem like it's that bad. When training, they say, all right, take a deep breath and nod when you're ready. Yeah, you don't get to do that shit when you're out on the street, though. They just fucking pop off and they light you up. And they don't do it once and then lay you down gingerly and pull the prongs out of your back. No, some people get lit up, 5, 6, 13, 14 fucking times. I can't imagine what that's like because you can't breathe. You could try to move. Maybe if I had gotten more practice at being tased, I could have worked towards taking a step or moving or doing something, but because it's supposed to break up all the brain signals of your body to stop you from moving or resisting or anything like that, you freeze up.
Also, if you're a meth head, I've seen some meth heads just keep going after getting hit with the tase.
Well, yeah, but that's probably the same thing as if they get punched in the fucking face or hit by a car. If you're that high, your brain's in a completely different state. But
that's an interesting thing, though, isn't it? I mean, they're so high on meth that it overrides however many volts that taser's doing.
So more people just need to do meth, and it won't matter how many times you get tased. But the taser's supposed to be less lethal, but there's still people dying from it because it disrupts your heart rhythm. And the thing that they always just freak out about, they try to sensationalize in the media, is the 50,000 volts. It's a lot of volts, but the low amperage, it's not like sticking a fucking tweezers in a power socket. It's not the same as a direct shock from a current in a light fixture or a power socket or power lines.
So that was second place with 39 deaths from a taser. You care to guess the third?
Is it getting hit by their car?
Indeed. Apparently,
cops killed
26 people with their vehicles.
The only other way I could figure you could die from the cops is from, hands and feet and them beating the shit out of you. Or I guess, and this is kind of a quirky one thinking about, is if they handcuff you too tightly behind your back and because of your physical build.
Sure, you can't breathe.
You have to have your hands free. If you don't know what it's like when you breathe, take a deep breath in. Your chest expands, and when it does that, your shoulders move, allowing your body to expand your chest so that your diaphragm can draw in the air. And if you can't do that, if somebody pulls your arms behind you, get you in a full Nelson, it's a bitch to fucking breathe. I've had somebody do it, hold me down, and I couldn't breathe. I'm like, I can't breathe. He's like, bullshit. No, you can't fucking breathe. If somebody holds your arms, if they get like a double underhook behind your back and hold your arms down behind your back, you can't expand your chest or move your shoulders to get that breath in.
Or they could throw you in the back of one of the paddy wagons unstrapped with a bunch of shitties.
Which leads us into my portion of the research tonight. Is when I got the idea for this episode, I just started jotting down names. And I didn't have to Google anything. There have been this many high-profile police killings in the last 2 or 3 years. It's probably only like a year and a half or 2 at max that I could recall off the top of my head. So the number one that you're talking about is Baltimore, Freddie Gray. And if you don't know about Freddie Gray, basically he was a total son of a bitch.
He was a fuckhead. Yes.
And the cops threw him in the back of the paddy wagon, handcuffed, and they didn't strap him or belt him in. And they said that he was actively resisting arrest. That it was too much of a safety issue to strap him in. So what happened was somewhere between when they threw him in the back of the wagon and when they got him back to the station or the hospital, he had brain damage. And he died, I think, of a severe brain hematoma.
Wasn't he seizing too?
Died. Well, he fucking died. I don't know if he was seizing. I didn't go in depth into each one of these cases. But, Freddie Gray died. And they just had the first trial of the first cop involved, and he was acquitted of murder charges or manslaughter charges, which I am okay with. All right, manslaughter's one thing. Typically when you cop a manslaughter charge, it's because you did not intend to kill them. It just kind of happened through one of a number of ways. But in this case, it's important to note that every officer involved with the hands-on of getting him into the back of that transport vehicle and not securing his body is guilty of criminal negligence. And people are like, well, fucking, he's resisting arrest. It's not about whether who's right or who's wrong. It's about covering your ass so you don't end up in a fucking jam like this. Every one of those motherfuckers that didn't seatbelt that idiot in is currently going, God, if only I had seatbelted him in, he would have just been an asshole that maybe would have taken a swing at me. I could have gotten a shiner or something. I would have gotten a few days off, and my fucking name wouldn't be all over the internet right now with an entire city's worth of pissed off civilians looking to find out where I live and come and thump me because they have an axe to grind with law enforcement. Every one of them wishes they could turn back the clock and fix it. And if they say they don't, I would be completely flabbergasted.
Well, and this one was after the Ferguson incident, too. So this was already at the forefront of all the media. People are just waiting for cops to do things. You drive by anywhere that a cop is doing something, and I bet you if it's not on the freeway, if it's in residential, there's somebody with a camera watching them and
yeah,
hoping.
Because there's a camera in every phone. As far as alluding to Ferguson, yeah, we had that whole mess with Mike Brown and that cop. And it's important to note that no matter how many baby-faced pictures of Mike Brown they put up in the media to try to say, well, this was a kid. Legally, he was an adult. He was 19 years old.
He was a thug. There are videos of him picking on, I think he was a homeless guy, or maybe he was just a crackhead, but he was just beating the guy mercilessly for no reason.
He had a rap sheet. He was no angel like they tried to originally portray him out to be. He had some website where people can upload their own music and put his own raps up. And I don't want to say that just because he raps about the thug lifestyle means that he was a thug. No, but that was the culture he was immersed in and the culture he was embracing. And if you look at before the shooting, he was in that convenience store. What was he, ripping off Swisher Sweets?
Oh, yeah, that too. He was pushing around the old man.
He pushed the clerk. He pushed the clerk around.
Real tough guy.
And then somewhere the cop tried to meet up with him to question him about it. Allegedly, a scuffle ensued. Some people say that it happened outside the car and that the cop just fucking pulled out his gun and murdered Mike Brown. I don't buy that shit, primarily because all of those character witnesses that wanted to say what happened originally didn't come forward for the trial. Even if they don't trust the cops and they're afraid that something's going to blow back on them, if you feel that strongly about an injustice being served that way, I would think you would want to speak up. But none of those people did. All of those witness testimonies were completely inadmissible because nobody wanted to come and back up what they had to say. So you only had the words of the officer who was acquitted, who said that there was a scuffle inside the vehicle and Mike grabbed for his gun and they fought over the gun and the gun went off and then he got out of the vehicle somehow and they scuffled more over the gun and then he shot him. I wasn't there. I don't know. It's unfortunate the whole thing happened, but it would have been entirely preventable if Mike Brown wasn't such a son of a bitch. And then immediately after all of this fervor, what did Ferguson do? Let's make up for this by looting and burning and destroying our own neighborhoods.
Which I never understood. What is the point of that? What are you trying to do? You're doing it in your own city. These are the places you live, you work in. Now you destroyed your neighbor's place of business, so they're not going to be able to go to work, so they can't provide a job for the 5 people that work for them. I don't understand the whole premise behind destroying your own city.
Opportunistic sons of bitches who are looking for free shit. That's all it is opportunism. They are preying upon these people because like, we're pissed off and people are out in the street, so we're going to go shatter some windows, steal some Air Jordans, get some booze, maybe a TV. And then they were breaking into pharmacies and taking Oxycontin.
Yeah, it was all selfish things. They weren't trying to prove a point. They weren't out there protesting.
You would think that if they were that pissed off with the cops, they'd go to the police station, start smashing windows and doors. They were, far away from the scene of the PD. They were, throwing Molotov cocktails and rocks and shit, and there were random acts of violence against police cruisers, but take it to the PD, like here in the 4th Precinct in Minneapolis with the shooting of, what the fuck was his name? Jamar Clark. And it was 2 white cops that shot Jamar Clark. Everybody went down to the 4th Precinct. They camped out. Black Lives Matter showed up. Some of them actually know what they're talking about, and I appreciate what they're doing. Most of them are basically just hanging off the coattails of the few that know what the fuck they're talking about, trying to be a part of the in crowd, it seems.
Well, and a lot of them aren't even from Minneapolis or Minnesota. There are a lot of them professional protesters that they're shipping in from Chicago or shipping in from Missouri and other states.
But look at the difference now. Nobody looted here.
Nope.
And to the best of my knowledge, Baltimore wasn't destroyed in the wake of the Freddie Gray incident. There was a lot of protests and some turned semi-violent. People got arrested for clash with the cops, but nobody outright tore the fucking city up like in Ferguson. I don't know what's different about those circumstances, but it's important to note that in the middle of all of that, while they were trying to figure out what happened, during the trial, the Department of Justice took over the Ferguson PD and fucking disbanded them. Eric Holder disbanded the Ferguson PD, and they contracted out to, I think, the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department, and that's who's policing them now. With the 2 cops here, well, some of them said that Jamar Clark was handcuffed. And other people are like, well, there was no way he was handcuffed. The ballistic reports did not reflect that he was handcuffed. He was actively resisting arrest, and he was interfering with EMTs that were trying to attend to a female acquaintance of his he domestically assaulted. So let's not say that we're getting justice for Jamar. I get that you're pissed off somebody else got killed by the cops. And yeah, there's probably other ways it could have been handled. Maybe what these cops should have just done is beat his ass. I don't know. But I think back to 3 years ago now, I think it was, there was some guy who was getting slammed against the fucking hood of a cop car in Minneapolis. And the cop kicked him and punched him. But that's because the guy was a domestic abuser. You know what? I'm fine with that. I honestly, if some guy is tuning up his old lady, if he just is a drunk bully who beats up on women and children, let the cops kick his ass. I'm fine with that. He should be entitled to no money in civil damages. You have given up your right to be recognized as a beneficial member of society and get all the protections when you victimize people that are weaker than you, that trust you, that you're supposed to take care of or are in charge of or supposedly love. Fuck you. You should be able to get thumped, and I have no problem with that.
I totally agree.
The next one, Texas, Sandra Bland. Sandra Bland got pulled over, and the cop was giving her the business, big time. It seemed like he just wanted to get her out of the car, search the vehicle, search her. The traffic stop was kind of hokey. She did have a small amount of marijuana, which ultimately I believe is what they took her in for, and possibly also either no seatbelt or no insurance. But Sandra Bland was somebody who had a history of mental health breakdown. And they stuck her in a cell by herself, and not too long thereafter she was arrested. She hung herself in her cell. They found her dead. They're trying to figure out who should be on the hook for this. Her family's furious. They felt she should have been cared for better, possibly put in a mental health care facility. I'm telling you, where I worked, she would have been in a safety cell on camera with 15-minute checks for her well-being. Somebody dropped the ball big time there, giving her the opportunity to hang herself in between rounds. And I don't know if she had major time hanging over her head. They didn't want to focus too much on her rap sheet. They never do, because that's not the sexy story. Here's all the fucked up things they did before and why you shouldn't care about the fact that they died. It's just, this person is dead. And I'm fine with that in this instance. She was mentally ill. Maybe she shouldn't have been left alone. I don't know. I wasn't there. It wasn't my judgment call. But I would have put her in a safety cell on 15-minute checks. The big one that recently, in the past week, the indictment came down against the officer that killed Laquan McDonald in Chicago. The video came out after a year, and people were putting a lot of pressure on the city of Chicago to release the video. And this is the video that, if you don't know the name of the individual killed, Laquan had allegedly broken into some vehicles and was walking down the street in the middle of, I think, a 4-lane intersection. And some cops showed up behind him, and some cops showed up in front of him. And he didn't charge the police. This guy veered to the right at a 45-degree angle away from the cops. And what happened was, and you see this in the dashboard cam of the cop who showed up behind Laquan, is 2 cops get out. One guy puts his hands up and tells him to stop. The other one draws out his duty weapon and shoots him 16 fucking times. All right, he shoots him a couple times while he's standing, and then Laquan spins around, hits the ground, and he's laying on his side, and then you see smoke come out of his body 2 more times, which means that he was on the ground, and they shot him while he was potentially already dead. He was incapacitated, and all they ever found on him was a pocket knife folded up in his pocket, not in his hand.
And the cop unloaded the gun on him.
The whole mag. Your magazine when you're in law enforcement is not 13 rounds. It's 16 rounds. He unloaded the whole fucking mag. If you thought that guy was a threat, I can't believe that you wouldn't have just fired off 3 rounds and then waited to see what happened. You just pop, 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 pop. Count off 16 rounds in your fucking head.
So this is just conjecture, but I'm willing to bet that he was still, if he had more in there, he would have added it.
Possibly.
After shooting, he just kept pulling the trigger.
If this was a Family Guy cutaway, he would have pulled it. He would have dropped the mag out. He would have put in a fresh one and shot the body on the ground another 16 fucking times. And I'm not trying to make light of this guy's death, because here's how I feel. Laquan McDonald was murdered by police. Some people get killed by police in the middle of a shootout, like the San Bernardino shooters. It was like a couple hundred rounds went into that vehicle. That thing was annihilated. Yep. They got killed by the cops. Laquan McDonald got murdered, and the indictment came down on the cop. So let's look at a couple of statistics with this, though. It was a white cop that shot Laquan McDonald. It was 2 white cops that shot Jamar Clark in Minneapolis. It was a white sheriff's deputy who arrested Sandra Bland. And it was a white cop in Ferguson who shot and killed Mike Brown. Freddie Gray was multiple officers of mixed races and genders, so really you can't play the race card there.
No.
But here's another one from most recent. Marksville, Louisiana. A guy, Chris Few, was in an SUV with a 6-year-old autistic son. And basically what happened, they pulled him over, and something happened, and the marshals drew down, and they shot into the vehicle and injured this guy. Well, the guy had his hands up, screaming, "My son's in the vehicle, don't shoot." And a 6-year-old autistic kid died because these two fucking Leos were that trigger happy. And it seemed like it was personal. These motherfuckers are going to pay, and they should. I'm all for locking these two dickweeds up and throwing away the key. Their career is gone. You fucking killed a child. Not so much like in Cleveland, Ohio with Tamir Rice, who, if you've seen the video, the name may ring a bell. Tamir Rice, I believe, was 7 years old. He was in a city park. He was hanging around a gondola or something, like a band shell, and he was pointing a pellet gun at people to scare them. And a cop showed up, and I believe it was in 5 seconds of getting out of the cruiser that the cop drew his weapon and shot this kid.
Not even enough time to assess the situation.
I would have pulled up, and I would have pulled out my CB, and I would have gotten on the loud horn and told the kid to drop the gun or I'm going to get out, and I will shoot him. Yes, he's 7. He's a child. He may not process that. But if you get out and you start screaming at him, are you telling me that a full-grown adult in a bulletproof vest can't strafe while pointing his gun and try to get closer and closer to the kid? Now, if that kid's not pulling the trigger, your mind should start to click with you that this is not a real gun. I get that these are split-second decisions. Logic does go out the window. And you train for these all the time to be better at them. You do video scenarios. I did video scenarios. There was one where it was a guy, I walked upon a scene, and it was a man who had a gun. So I drew out my gun. And he pulls out a baby carrier from his truck. So he's got his gun out, and he's carrying a baby. And just the second I saw that, I went, shit. But I'm just like, sir, drop the weapon, drop the weapon. So as he's backing up, and then he starts to turn around and walk away with this baby, I was lowering my imaginary gun while we were doing this. I wasn't trying to aim for him, because there's a fucking baby. He grabbed the baby and had the gun. You didn't grab the baby and point the gun. So right then and there, yes, it wasn't real life, but I had to do it split second because my teacher was the chief of police of a local PD. So obviously I was trying to look like I knew what the fuck I was doing.
And so obviously things have to change when a child is involved. So the cop should have been going into this already seeing that it's a child. He should have had a different mindset.
Why are so many people stepping out from behind their cruiser and drawing down, and why aren't more people ducking behind the door of their cruiser and pointing a gun and giving orders? I get that real life isn't like TV, but in this hypersensitive nature where everyone's got a camera and there's so many high-profile shootings now, you would think that, okay, I'm about to become a fucking statistic here. I'm probably going to be the next cop that's on CNN and my life is over. Let's think this through.
Well, logically, most of those cruisers have ballistic door panels too. So wouldn't you, as a cop, going into that situation, feel safer behind a ballistic panel than just stepping out?
Yeah, but if it's an AK-47 or a high-powered assault rifle, it's going right through that fucking door.
You don't think it'll deflect a little?
A little, but
I know the ballistic panels aren't bulletproof, but they're designed to deflect them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Here's a few more. Wilmington, Delaware. Jamie McDowell was a guy in a wheelchair, but he had a .38 caliber. I don't know if he was brandishing the gun at officers. I think he was pointing it at himself. And they fucking lit him up. So it seems that when things go bad and they draw down and they decide to pull the trigger,
they go all out.
The first one that pulls the trigger, the other two start pulling. You zone out. You're so focused in on the adrenaline that you hear that first gunshot and then all the other triggers get pulled. And nobody stops until they're out or somebody goes, stop firing. I don't know. I haven't been involved in any active police shootings. I wouldn't fucking want to be. What other one did I have? Paradise, California. This is the video I made you watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should get to that one next.
Andrew Thomas, driving drunk, leaving a bar. Apparently he had gotten into a fight with his estranged wife who he was hanging out with at the time, and they left the bar. And you explain what you saw in the video.
Well, I just seen the video for the first time about 30 minutes ago, and this is actually the first time I had even heard about it.
I brought it up, and he's like, I hadn't heard about that. And I'm like, watch the fucking video right now.
So the video starts with the dash cam from the cruiser before the car even flips. Like, the cop's just joining the chase or whatever. All of a sudden, you just see a little bit of smoke, and then the cop pulls up onto a rolled SUV. It looked like maybe a Navigator, something big.
It was laying on its side.
Incapacitated.
The vehicle was laying on the driver's side.
Fucked up. And the cop gets out.
And then you see him climbing out of the passenger side video, and then what happens?
Then that's when the cop walks up without a hesitation and just caps him twice.
In the fucking
boom,
neck.
Boom, boom. You see the guy just fold and fall back in. Then the cop walks up there. And keep in mind, this vehicle is on its side. The cop looks into it like he's looking into a dumpster at a squirrel he just capped. Nothing. Not even a flinch. This cop, it was cold-blooded murder, straight up.
What happened then is that the cop tried to claim that he didn't know he fired his gun. He admitted that he drew down, but it took him 11 minutes from the time that he fired his weapon to when he contacted his supervisor to say that he had discharged his firearm at the scene of the accident.
Yeah, there was no time in between when the cop got out and when the cop pulled the trigger. I'd say...
It was so fucking fast, it was ridiculous.
The guy never even had a chance to pull anything or to act aggressively. He was just climbing out of this vehicle that had looked like it rolled probably a couple times at least.
Yeah, the whole thing doesn't really do a lot to help with public perception of police. And me personally, I have a very strong disdain for law enforcement. I don't like them, I don't trust them, but I recognize their presence as a necessary evil. A lot of people just outright hate the cops. Every time I see a cop, I just think, fuck you. You know, or if I pull up to an intersection with a cruiser, I'm just like, all right, let's count to 3 before we go so this dickbag doesn't have a reason to ruin my day. All right, that makes me sound like I'm only anti-cop. There are not solely bad cops in this country. But the media perpetuates the stereotype that all law enforcement officers are trigger-happy, angry sons of bitches looking to kill you, and they don't give a fuck about you. It's a partial truth, because the number one rule when you are a cop in your shift is everybody goes home. Officer safety is above everything else. I get it. But you signed up for the job, so you know there's that inherent danger. So you take the inherent danger and the duty to survive and protect your coworkers with the, I don't want to be the next statistic. Something has to change. But what's going to change? And things they've talked about, you know, they came out with tasers. But tasers are less lethal, but they still can be lethal. They're supposed to be non-lethal, but they're not. Statistics show they're not. What's the answer, though? Rubber bullets. They talk about maybe cops could have a magazine of rubber bullets in their gun to start with. A lot of cops are going to say, fuck that shit. I'm not going to go into a gunfight with rubber bullets because the bad guys aren't shooting rubber bullets. I understand that, but maybe it's time that you carry 2 guns. Maybe we don't need the tasers.
You know, I'm surprised they've never thought about that before. That would be a simple solution. You got your lethal and your non-lethal. They can both be on your hip.
There was that old guy that was a sheriff's deputy reserve down in some southern state. I want to say it was Alabama. And they had a guy on the ground. And he pulled out his gun. And he shot the guy twice. And he died. He's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I thought it was my taser. So here's this like 60-some-year-old former city council member, son of a bitch, who wants to play cops and robbers who they let be a reserve. In the heat of the moment, they've got him on the ground. They're trying to subdue him. He's fighting 3 cops. He pulls out his gun instead of his taser. So, yeah, you could have 2 guns, but then it's like, well, fuck, do I grab the right one?
Right.
Because what are you going to do? You're going to have them on the same side? Are you going to be a righty that's going to shoot southpaw with a less lethal? Or are you going to pull it left-handed and quick switch? There's all these different logistics that get considered when you're trying to look at how a situation breaks down. And I don't want to see cops just be at a statistical disadvantage, but we can't keep killing people. There is no easy answer. It's basically like trying to jam a square peg in a round hole. The overarching theme of this episode is people that die from police contact. What does the media do? The media is demonizing the police. And what is Black Lives Matter doing? Focusing all the heat on police. What is nobody in the media doing? Pointing back the blame on those that put themselves in the situation, who are already in the midst of a criminal act, who probably shouldn't have been there. And why do we do that in this country? Why don't we say, well, you know, Mike Brown was a piece of shit.
He was a fuckhead. They don't ever say that.
And if you think back to the hearings that they had in front of the Ferguson Police Department, Mike Brown's mother and stepdad were there. You recall what his stepdad had to say? Burn this bitch down! And the next day he had to apologize for it because they were going to charge him with inciting a riot. So right then and there, we're going to default to destruction. Let's burn down the establishment, fucking literally. And that's not necessarily fair. I get that there's massive distrust of the police, but you have to have faith in the process somewhere. You might think, well, the cops are just going to let the other cops off. That's not the case. How many cases have there been where cops have gotten a little crazy and the entire force instantly flipped like a switch on them and were like, let's go hunt this motherfucker down? Some cops take pride in taking down other cops, whether they think they're dirty or whether they just want, Christ, it's like a shark that smells blood in the water.
There's a snitch in every crew.
It's sad, but it's true. People instantly flip on the cops, and not enough people are taking the time to hold the victims accountable. Hold them accountable for their actions.
Because basically in all of these instances, the killing would have never happened had the person not have initiated contact with the cops in the first place.
Look what happened around these parts a week and a half ago at that Target store. Guy's reaching into like his sock or his shoe. Gun falls out of his waistband, discharges, bullet ricochets, goes off into the ceiling. Somebody could have gotten shot. And what if you got one of your gun-toting Second Amendment nuts in there that draws down and thinks that it's a shooting, and then you get the panic of a mass shooting where you don't know if you're shooting the active shooter. You don't know if you're shooting somebody running in the panic. I don't know what the scene was like there. I guess everybody kind of froze up because they didn't know what happened because it was a single shot. There's a lot of cops at that Target store.
Which one was this, Fridley? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe, what if they would have had an armed security officer there?
I think the only other worst one is the quarry, huh?
Yeah, fucking A. I wouldn't want to go anywhere in the Northeast. That back when I worked for Home Depot, I had to go to that Home Depot a few times. I was like, I don't know about this fucking neighborhood. But it's right there in St. Anthony. It's in between. You know, like I bought my car at Boyer Ford, which is literally 2 blocks from that Home Depot. So that neighborhood gets a bad rap. Maybe it's after dark. It didn't seem dangerous, but I wasn't like, hey, does anybody have any illegal narcotics or unregistered weapons? I'm just taking numbers for statistics.
It's kind of right in between the good neighborhoods and the bad neighborhoods. So yeah, it kind of is like what you're saying. After dark, that's when it gets a little hairy down there.
So all the cops and all the guns and all the people that need to be held accountable. And maybe the rubber bullets and maybe the tasers and maybe there's something we haven't thought of yet. Do you feel the police are a necessary segment of our population? Does our society need to have cops?
That one's a hard one. I'd like to think that people in general are by nature good enough to govern themselves.
But they're not. Some are and some aren't.
I think it would be really bloody for like the first couple years. You know, after so many people got capped after committing a robbery, committing a crime, I think they would think twice.
But that's the thing. Would it be social justice via militias, or would it be the purge? Would it just be people that have the guns preying upon the people that don't have the guns, and everybody that wants to survive has to hunker down in their homes and wait for the shit to end?
In the first, like I said, in the first couple years, I think it'd be a lot of fuckery going on.
That's why the Wild West was the Wild West, and why if you were a cop back then or a sheriff, you didn't last very long. I'm willing to bet that term expectancy of your average Wild West, old-time California sheriff was like measurable in days or weeks. Maybe not months. Not everybody was fucking Wyatt Earp.
Well, definitely, and then it's going to depend on what town, too. I live in Elk River, and actually the cops in Elk River aren't that bad. But if you took away the police force there, you're going to have a different set of circumstances.
Your sandwich.
As if you take cops away from
Blaine,
Anoka,
St. Paul,
Coon Rapids,
Lauderdale.
And then it's going to be even different if you take them out of North Minneapolis, the 4th Precinct. If you just shut that whole area down, you're going to have a completely different reaction. So it's hard to say if it would work or not.
Inver Grove Heights, Cottage Grove, would it devolve into chaos down there?
Once you're getting down there,
Eden Prairie, the more affluent suburb. Oh my God, not Woodbury. It would be like Tombstone in Woodbury with all those soccer moms and their small little snub-nosed purse guns.
And the crazy little Asians.
Really? Are there a lot of Asians in Woodbury?
Yes. It's kind of like...
I don't drive around there a lot.
It's kind of like Maplewood.
Maplewood, yeah, it's got a lot, yeah.
But I know they call Woodbury Hoodbury, too. So,
do they?
But I think it's mostly rich little
Yeah,
little
I think
kids.
that's more of like mocking them more than anything.
More like Malibu's Most Wanted.
Pretty much. So that's probably going to do it for this topic. I don't know what else to add because we don't have any answers to this problem. And we hope that you found all of these statistics very helpful. Feel free to comment on the videos on YouTube. What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
I'm Danny.
And that's the end.